Hello and welcome to our April Q&A video. So this is basically a series where I try to answer as many of your guys' questions as I can. This is the second video we're doing this way, only about 2 weeks after the last one. So there's not been quite as many questions asked as last time, and I assume since the first one would probably have the most built up questions, we'll probably get a little bit shorter and shorter as we go. So this shouldn't be another 40-minute one, but you guys can see the final length of the video right now. I can't. But yeah, so basically in this series, I answer questions primarily from patrons, Twitch subs, and channel members in a way that's accessible to everyone. But I also try to throw in some comment questions from the last one. So if you would like to ask a question for June, you can leave it in the comments here. Or if you are a patron, a channel member on YouTube, or a Twitch sub, including Amazon Prime subs, there will be a link in the description to the Patreon thread for that, as well as information if you would like to become one of those things. But we are going to get into it. Again, not as many questions as last time, so shouldn't be 40 minutes. The first question we have is from Brady. Is the dark side stronger? No. No. Easier. More seductive. Second up, we have a question from William Hoover, who asks, what do you think of the ground units and space units in Rebellion? Their power and place in the Star Wars foray that you know. So, Rebellion is a bit weird. There was a lot of stuff introduced there, like I think the Dauntless was originally there, the Quasar, the Liberator, and they've all become pretty prominent in universe. Some were mentioned in books before, but like their first actual representation coming in Rebellion, and some stuff that gets like retconned into some of those things. Like I don't actually think in Truce of Bakura it's mentioned that the ship is a Quasar itself. It's just later it became one. I could be wrong on that, but with a lot of Rebellion stuff, you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt because they were trying to stat stuff a bit more evenly. So that can be a bit of a problem, but I think it's a really good source for like adding some ships, fleshing some out, adding and fleshing out some characters. But yeah, I haven't played as much Rebellion as I'd like. You guys have kind of seen the results of that, where I'm just terrible at the game. But thank you, William and Brady. That's kind of my thoughts on that. I don't really, again, I do want to spend more time playing it, but it's just I lose every time so horribly because I have no idea what I'm doing. Cabal asks, did you guys ever think of doing a non-Star Wars mod before you went with Fall of the Republic? Still waiting for that Babylon 5 mod. I have never seen, read, or heard of anything to do with Babylon 5, so I'd be a terrible person to make a Babylon 5 mod. We have actually thought about doing a non-Star Wars mod before. So I've actually contributed to some mods that are not Star Wars, where I did a decent amount of models for Halo Campaign Commander, which is a ground skirmish only mod that was made by Farseer, who made Rise of the Mandalorians. So there's a bunch of models in there that are actually made by me, and myself, Farseer, and that one Bullet from AOTR have spoken about potentially working on like some Halo stuff. But the main thing here would actually be not instead of Fall of the Republic, which was kind of always Fall of the Republic, but for Ascendancy or Sins of a Solar Empire mod, where when we were starting it, we were actually thinking about making up our own universe. So one or two of the Empire of the Hand ship designs actually came from designs I'd been trying to make for that. It never really got to anything in game, but if you look at my mod database profile, there's a picture of like or it might be on Zers, but it's like it's almost like a soccer ball with the band around it, and that was meant to be one of the faction logos. And I think we were going to be super original and make it like Space Rome kind of situation, collapsing Space Roman Empire. Like, not actual Romans, but just kind of inspired by that situation, which almost everything is. But we were... that would have been 2012? No, 2011. So, yeah. Much less experienced, much younger. I wouldn't have really gotten anywhere. But, because like the thing with Sins is that you only have to do space, you don't have to do ground, which is kind of one of the big stopping points for doing other stuff for Empire at War as well. You can do stuff without ground, like Stargate did for a while, but we typically wouldn't want to do that because it impacts the game pace so much. But yeah. Thank you, Cabal. Next question we have is from Hawkeye Pierce, who says, "How are you?" I'm good. How are you? What is a feature, unit, or etc. that you added but was later removed? Is it possible to have more people in the Q&A for a panel discussion, time zones permitting? Uh, so for the latter part, these Q&As tend to be a mix of mod stuff and channel stuff or me stuff, depending on what people want to ask about. So I don't know that having other devs in, I'm assuming that's what you mean by other people, uh, in these videos would go super well or would do a ton, because they are meant to be more like quick Q&As for answering anything. But when we do stuff like Monday Night Modding or release streams, dev streams, those typically will get more input from other team members. So I think that's a decent balance there. So, and then with like YouTube content partners like Eck and Charlie, a lot of stuff would just come up when we're doing our streams together. But for the other thing, what's a feature, unit, or etc. that you added that was later removed? There's been a fair amount of units that have come and gone as the years have progressed, because it's been 14 years now almost. We're about a month away from it being 14 years now. And like the Empire of the Hand, the Peltist actually came from an older idea that was never really put in from like 2007 or 2008. There was a ship called the Karavnos, which was a giant diamond thing. We showed the model, but it never made it in game, or it made it in game. It never made it into a release. And this is like first iteration Empire of the Hand, so really terrible models. Pre 1.0, no one ever really touched them. Because they were mostly redone by the time the mod was released. But it shot a nuke out of its. It had a front missile tube that would shoot a nuke out and just annihilate shit. And that kind of became later on, like 10 years later, the Peltist main cannon idea. And it was something that we'd wanted to do basically the entire time and just never had the right design for it. But for a feature, this is another thing that kind of gets back to Ascendancy, because the biggest feature that is sticking out that was like in game, we did it and then we removed it, was a thing called migration. So if you've never played Sins of a Solar Empire before, it's kind of like Empire at War, but it's all real time and it's space only. So you'll have your ships in one system. You could have a battle going on in another system. You can have like 3 battles going on at once. You sort of zoom in and out and command your stuff that way. So it all takes place in the gravity wells of different planets that are connected in a kind of similar way to Empire at War, with like the trade routes and everything. So the planets have a stat for pop cap and population growth, but usually it's just like you take over the planet, it'll fill up soon, and that's really all there is to it. There's not much differentiation to what you're doing with the planets. When you take planets, you're usually not doing too much with them afterwards, which is sort of the case in Empire at War as well, but that's why we're introducing stuff like influence and some other things. And Sins doesn't have quite the same levers to work with in some ways, but it does have a really robust ability system. So like you can't do scripting the way you can do in Empire at War, but you can do new abilities in a much more creative way. And you can tie them to pretty much whatever. So it's a thing called buff chains, where you like apply a buff to this thing, it does this thing, which can apply a buff to another thing, it does another thing. But one way we intended to sort of differentiate planets was have some planets have a really high pop cap, but a really low pop growth rate, and some planets that have like really low pop cap, but a really high pop growth rate. And this impacts like your credit income and everything. So we made shuttle units that you could cast an ability on the planet that would sort of load up the shuttle with, at that point it would have been civilians, but now it would be like garrisons. You're moving your garrisons around. So yeah, that puts it on the shuttle. You fly the shuttle over to another planet, you recast the ability, and that puts those population on that other planet. So if you had a planet that grew really slowly and a planet that grew really quickly, you'd be able to like pull some from one to the other. But making that a core gameplay mechanic, it was just too much busy work. Like, there was no real strategic decisions there that it added, maybe a bit on which planets you'd be going for, but it just wasn't worth the unclear micro that was going on, where it was difficult to manage. You had other stuff you probably would have more fun doing. So it was kind of disappointing because I thought it was interesting at first, but it's just the kind of thing that didn't really work out. And oh, actually, another one for Empire at War is what we called the diplomacy system, which later kind of morphed into the influence system, where planets were, and this is actually still downloadable as like a standalone mod for Forces of Corruption that we put out like a test thing. So Pox did all this where he organized planets into different sectors on the galactic map. And each planet had an amount of control on it for your faction or for like the owner faction for another faction. And I might be misremembering how some of the details go, but they all sort of tied into the same sector where if you lost control on one planet, it would reduce influence on another planet, and these planets would then flip to the enemy if they got too low in control. But and the way you would do this is like you'd go deploy these diplomat units there. But the downside, it there were some interesting elements to it, and it was nice to have something different to manage the galactic level with different ways to take over planets. But especially the way it was implemented there, it ended up just feeling kind of frustrating, where it was like this thing that you were trying to keep up with, but the especially with like more remote starts. So if you started with the planet in one area and it's surrounded, within a week or two, you just lose that planet because of the influence coming from the other planets around it. And that kind of is what evolved into what is the influence system now, which we're still fleshing out more, but has a few more levers that you can pull. It's a bit more interactive, has a few different effects. So ultimately kind of works a fair bit better. So I guess it's not really a cut feature, but it is one that was significantly overhauled and left out for a long time from its original implementation. But I think that's all the patron questions. So now for the first YouTube question, we have one from Speedster145. I know you stated a desire for Unknown Regions content, yippee, and, excuse my spelling, but a Zinj overhaul. Can you tell us more along with other stuff in the works? There's actually a kind of rough roadmap on the Steam Workshop page. So kind of outlining what we're going to be working on at different stages, but like all the Imperial rosters are going to be kind of shuffled around a bit in 2.3.6 and 2.3.7. There's some other Zinj stuff that's coming, like the Aggressor Star Destroyer, which is one of the base units from Forces of Corruption. And like the Empire of the Hand is getting slowly reworked. That's going to be less of a specific release focus and more of a as we go focus. Chiss are being added, Killik, Sirubi, just to make there be more stuff going on in the Unknown Regions. So it's not like the Empire of the Hand just controls it all from the start. But some of this stuff we plan is like a release built around it. Some of the stuff we plan to do just as we go, like the Empire of the Hand. And some of the stuff like where we have the Hapens are kind of slated to be done for 2.4, but really the way that works is that the release that the Hapens are done and playable in becomes 2.4, rather than saying like we're trying to hit it by this specific date. Because honestly, I'd rather call the release we're doing right now 2.4, because it's such a big overhaul, and that might be something we even go with. But then it'd be confusing for people looking for Hapens. So it's hard to say like when any individual thing is going to be done, but we're kind of picking away at all the different work at once. Next up, we have a question from Heavy Arms 55, and I think we're going to go for a couple more minutes. Which force powers throughout all of Star Wars do you think are the most over the top? Personally, I would say flow walking and essence transfer. Yeah, essence transfer is kind of strange, but the one that always just sort of sticks out to me is Electric Judgment, where it's like, it's just Force Lightning, but you want to give it a different name so you can claim it's not a dark side power. It just feels like a weird cop-out to me. Because I'm fine with a lot of latitude on, like, the Force can do all these weird things, but the stuff that feels like a cop-out instead of just a thing that was built up to do something is usually what gets me. Like, I don't care if people want to tell a story about like Palpatine coming back from the dead, whether that's Legends or canon, and they want to invent essence transfer for that, fine. Those are the rules you're setting up. But if you want to be like, okay, we see Palpatine using Force lightning, and I want Luke to use that power, but I want it to not be that because it'd look cool if he did it, but it's somehow inherently different when Luke uses it to when Palpatine uses it. It just feels kind of dumb to me. But yeah, because they kind of talk about it in Dark Nest, and I think this was a better handling of it, where it still ultimately turns out to be like, no, this is an aggressive move you're doing. This is of the dark side. But Jason and Luke's philosophical discussion just kind of lead in this direction where the Jedi are kind of like going astray, and I kind of like how that was done more. I know that's probably an unpopular opinion. The Dark Nest Crisis books are not well loved in certain elements of the community, but that's kind of just my preference there. Any projection on when 2.3.6 will be released? We already posted the release date for that. It's on Monday. Any chance of a single planet start with patrons and YouTube patrons coming back from Dragonfire Blitz? Yeah, there will be actually a video coming out soon with unit selection for Community Challenge in a minute. Or not in a minute. In a couple days. Because we're getting to the end of the CIS playthrough. Monster of the Asylum wants to know, I want your personal thoughts on Karen Travis's take on Mandalorian culture, the first real place things get fleshed out from modern culture, at least, versus what we get and can take away from The Mandalorian. Given that I grew up with the Republic Commando novels and the Old Republic games, I lean towards her, but the only real problems I have are the lack of helmet removal in new canon and this purge of reclusion post-Empire. Purge and reclusion post-Empire, but that's me being rambly. I want to hear your take between the two and what you think could be done differently, how they could be meshed, or what you just prefer. So there was pretty much a Mandalorian purge in both sides of it, and under the Empire, and then a good part of post-Empire and Legends is the Mandalorians trying to rebuild. Like Boba Fett becomes Mandalore, and by like 40 ABY, they're proud of this fighter they build. And because of stuff that happens in the Marvel comics, it kind of like they had some sort of fleet for fighting the Nagai, but it's not really that far off post Endor from what we see in the Mandalorian. The cultural rule of like not removing your helmet, notwithstanding, which I think is an interesting thing for them, for the Mandalorian warriors. I typically think Karen Travis goes a bit overboard with a lot of Mandalorian stuff and just shoehorns it into everything. Like when you're reading Legacy of the Force, it's so jarring where it's like Troy Denning's book, and was that Aaron Alston or was he Fate of the Jedi? I think it was Legacy of the Force was Troy Denning, Aaron Alston, and hold on. No, Fate of the Jedi was that. Legacy of the Force was Karen Travis, Aaron Alston. Okay, so it was. Oh, right, because Karen Travis got. Right. So Troy Denning, Aaron Alston, and Karen Travis, where Troy Denning and Aaron Alston, their books, and most of Karen Travis's tend to go together pretty well. But Karen Travis's always have these digressions about the Mandalorians, and it's like Jaina goes to the Mandalorians to be taught how to fight her brother, and it's just she puts them as being so powerful, and she's the one that takes like the number from Attack of the Clones as being a specific number of individual soldiers and tries to solidify that rather than like units being like company, platoon, whatever. As if like the whole galactic war is being fought by literally 2 million clones, and that's all that are there in the Clone Wars. Or like 3 to 4 million, whatever. So I don't love it. It's like it's just like so overpowered and it's weird. I enjoy Republic Commando the game. I enjoyed the Republic Commando books a fair bit. Like I like that it gave the clones this like culture they were trying to be a part of and find out who they were. But it just makes them so strong. It makes Mandalorian so strong. It's like Mandalorian fan fiction gone off the rails. But yeah, so like there's part of the books I enjoy, but that element to it, like the actual results for Mandalorians that Karen Travis tries to get, I don't really love. Churjo 12 wants to know, would you prefer a Twilight? Nope, that's kind of weird. There is no specific Star Wars species I would rather date. But, yeah. Too lazy to make a username wants to know, can you cover the first faction that was added to the mod that wasn't the New Republic or Imperial Remnant? So the Empire of the Hand was actually pretty much always there. They were added fairly early on to our Empire war build, so like pre Forces of Corruption. So when we were just figuring out how to add additional factions. Um, so yeah, that it was Empire of the Hand. Then I think Pentastar alignment was added after that, Duskin League, and then we kind of got to the 2.2 stuff. So one of the coolest things to me was when I figured out how to like do all this stuff to get the Empire of the Hand working, because it wasn't really something that I'd seen in Empire War before. People adding factions rather than just replacing one or the other, and it's something that doesn't really happen that much outside of a couple mods. Yeah. Is there anything else? Hendrik Felix wants to know. I also wanted to get started in modding. I wanted to ask if you had some kind of advice for me as a bloody beginner. I am planning some videos in the Modding 101 series. So there was a getting started in Empire at War modding video that I did once that you can check out. But I want to do a more like generic, or not generic, more general advice kind of video on like what you should do. My advice for people who want to start a mod. So that should be coming fairly soon. Uh, and yeah, so I think that covers it for those. If you want to get a question in for the next video, make sure to answer all the patron, Twitch sub, and YouTube comment or YouTube channel member questions. And then basically, I think I'm going to aim for like 20-minute videos and fill up any extra time if there's time left after doing all those with each one. I'll get to comment questions. And again, if you would like to see this done as a stream potentially next time, let me know, and we'll give that a shot for June. But yeah, so there will be a link in the description to the Patreon page for asking June questions, or just leave them in the comments. So thanks for watching. Have a good one, everyone. See you later.